Begin today the Gemara on the top of Daf Nun Vav Amud Aleph, 2 lines from the top, going back to what it said in the Mishnah in the beginning of the Perek. So it said, Echad Hamare ve'echad Hagoymer Kana. When it comes to the relation of a Yavam and the Yevamos, whether it was a full bia, whether it was only the beginning, either way you're kaina. Then it said afterwards in the Mishnah, or actually it said before that in the Mishnah, regarding all different kinds of scenarios of bia, whether it was beratzen or b'sheigig, b'mezid, b'oinis, which means even if it was not with any kavanah of a mitzvah, but nevertheless the bia is still kaina. So the continuation of the Gemara, there will be a machlokes about to what extent this mitzvah, the kinyan and the mitzvah is done. So the Gemara, my kana, regarding to what extent does this bia take effect? So Rashi over here says that the Gemara's question is going on, the Lashon of Rashi is biyais gruais, these inferior levels of bia where it was not done fully properly, to what extent is it kaina? There's actually a machlekes rishonim what the Gemara is referring to. Some say, even though the Gemara is quoting here the Lashon of the Mishnah, Echad HaMa'ara ve'echad HaGoymer, it's not referring to any of these two, because we already learned out before that whether it's the beginning of the act or the full act, it's considered to be a regular bia. But the Gemara is only referring to b'sheigig, b'mezid, b'oinis, where there was no kavanah for a mitzvah. That's what Rashi refers to as biyais gruais, is not the full regular kavanah in the mitzvah. But there are other rishonim that say that even ma'ara, which the Gemara was marbe, that is considered to be a bia, but nevertheless it's also part of the biyais gruais, it's not full bia, and therefore that's part of the Gemara's question here of my kana. So the Gemara brings a machlekes. Rav says, kana lakel, that these kinds of bias are kind of for everything. She's 100% his wife for everything. And as we'll see here in the Gemara, the main chiddush of Rav when he says kana lakel is relevant regarding a case where the Yavam is a kayin. And the halacha is that a Bas Yisrael that marries a kayin and it's a full marriage, then she can eat truma. So when Rav is saying kana lakel, the main chiddush of Rav is regarding this halacha that if she's marrying a kayin, if the Yavam is a kayin, she'll be able to eat truma right away, even with any of these kinds of inferior bias. Shmuel says, Lekana ela ledvarim ha'amurim beparsha. These kinds of bias that were marbe from the pasuk that it takes effect by Yavam and Yevamos, but it's only for those things that are explicitly mentioned in the parsha that it takes effect, which is lirish b'nichsei achiv, the fact that the Yavam inherits the possessions of his brother. It says it clearly over there in the pasuk that he yarshins yakom al shem achiv, and also lepaitra min ha'yivum. That now, once he did his bia, so the yivum is done, and now any tzara does not have to do yivum anymore, and that if she would want to go and get married to someone else, he just gives her a get, she doesn't need any chalitza. So for that, these kinds of bias takes effect. But regarding the fact that she's fully his wife, that if he would be a kohen, she can eat truma, that not, because that's not written here in the parsha. So the Gemara explains in what scenario are Rav and Shmuel arguing. There'll be 2 different versions over here in the Gemara regarding this. The Gemara starts with the first version. So now, min anisuin, if the case over here is that she was fully married to her husband that passed away, to the brother. Right, so like I said, the main relevance of this halach is regarding truma. So that means she was married to a kohen, and she was fully married to the kohen. So now, if she was already married to a kohen, so divrei hakoil, everybody would agree, achla, that now, after her husband, the kohen passed away, so what happens is, after her husband passes away, she can't eat truma anymore. The halacha is that once her husband passes away, and she didn't have any children with him, she can't eat truma anymore. But now, if the brother goes and does yibum with one of these inferior bias, everybody will agree that she will be able to eat truma. Why? The hahavis ka'achla meikara. Since she already was married to a brother, that when she was married to a kohen, she was able to eat truma then, so therefore now that the brother went and did yibum, she's able to eat truma because she was already before married to a kohen. So that koyach of the yibum continues the ability of her eating truma that she had before, even though it was an inferior bia. That's beneged to nisuin. Ki pligi, when is the machlekes of Rav and Shmuel min ha'erisin? If she was married to the brother, to the kohen that passed away, but she was never fully married to him, there was only erisin. The halacha by erisin is a woman that is only me'ores as to a kohen, she doesn't need any truma. So therefore Rav says oicheles. But still, now that the Yavam, the kohen, did any of these bias, she will eat truma. Why? The harabi rachmana bias sheigig kemezit. Because there's psukim that we learn out that the Torah says that the bia of a sheigig and a mezid, even though both of them are not with a kavanah of a mitzvah, nevertheless, it's a good bia and it takes effect. So once the Torah is marbe, it's even for the truma as well that she's fully married. Shmuel says, Ki Rabbi Rachmana like me b'makim bal. When the Torah says that these bias takes effect, so that means that she'll be on the same level as her previous husband. And over here, her previous husband, there was only Edison, and she was not able to eat truma if he's a kain. But la lume mibal, to say that these kinds of bias will make her married to her yavam even stronger than the way she was to her original husband, that she could not eat truma, like, so far it doesn't go. So the machlokes is only in this Yevamos that came from an Edison to a Kayin. And now the question is, what's with the bia, these kinds of bias, to this Yavam, a Kayin, if she can eat truma or not? Says the Gemara of Azda Shmuel at Taimei. Shmuel follows his reasoning where he said clearly this concept in another place. Amar of Nachman, Amar Shmuel. So he said as follows: Kol Shah Baal Machil, in a case where she was married to her husband, to her first husband, the Kayin, and she was fully married to him, and therefore she was able to eat truma, so then Yavam Machil. So the Yavam as well, even if it was an inferior bia, she can eat truma with him. But the Chol Sheina Baal Machil, if she was not fully married to her original husband, like we just said, only Edison, so then Yavam Eina Machil. So in one of these inferior bias, then the Yavam will not be Machil or any truma. So this is the opinion of Shmuel. The Gemara asks on Shmuel, Meisvei, it says in the Braisa as follows: Bas Yisrael pikachas. If you have a Bas Yisrael that's healthy, normal, shenis arsa lekayin, and she gets married, the first stage of marriage, Edison, to a kayin pikeach, to a kayin that's also 100% normal. What happened then? V'lehispik lekainsa. He did not get a chance to do the nisuin, the second stage of marriage, at shenis charish. Now this kayin became a cheresh. He's deaf mute, and he has the halacha of a person that's not a bardas, and min ha-Torah, at this point he's not a bardas, so he can't go ahead and do the nisuin anymore. So what's the halacha? So einoi cheles. She can't eat any truma. Like I said, the halacha is that a Bas Yisrael that marries a kayin, only Edison cannot eat truma. But now, because he became a cheresh, so you can't do the second stage of marriage, she will not be able to eat truma. Meis. If now this kayin passed away, v'nafla lifnei yavam, so now she fell to a brother, a kayin, for yibum, cheresh, and that brother is also deaf mute. So what happens? Oicheles. Over here, if the yavam is miyavim her, and he does bia, now this bia that this yavam is miyavim her is also, it's an inferior bia, because he's not a bardas b'chlal. He can't have kavanah for a mitzvah. A cheresh that does the bia is similar to the cases that we were speaking about before, shegig, mezid, and oinis. So, but over here, the Braisa says, when she falls to this yavam, which is a cheresh, oicheles, she could eat truma. And the Braisa concludes, ubezu yafe koyach hayavam b'koyach habal. This is a case where the bia of the yavam, even though he's a cheresh, is going to be stronger than the koyach of the baal, that the baal himself, which is a cheresh, she will not be able to eat truma, but with the yavam, she will be able to eat truma. Says the Gemara, Bishleim el Rav niche. So according to Rav, this Braisa is perfect. The Braisa is saying the exact halacha that Rav said before, that in the case of Edison, even though by the baal she did not eat truma, but by the yavam she could eat truma with such a kind of a bia. Elo Shmuel, but according to Shmuel, Kashya, this Braisa is a clear question on what Shmuel said. Shmuel said a klal, that with these inferior bias, you can't be stronger than the husband himself that she was married to before. And over here it says clearly the first husband was a cheresh, now the yavam is also a cheresh, and the bia of the husband does not work to be meichel her truma, but the bia of the yavam does work to be meichel her truma. Amalach Shmuel, so Shmuel says you have to change the words of this Braisa. Eima hachi. Read the Braisa as follows. V'loi hispik l'koinsa. So the Braisa starts off saying that there was an Edison, the first stage of marriage between this Bas Yisrael and the Kohen, and he didn't yet get a chance to fully marry her. Achan is charish, and he became a cheresh. So then the Braisa, the first halacha of the Braisa is, like we read before, Eina echeles betruma, she cannot eat truma. But now here you have to add into the Braisa as follows. Konas, if he did fully marry her before he became a cheresh, and only afterwards he became a cheresh, so then echeles. She can eat truma, she's already fully married to the kayin, and he was not a cheresh when he fully married her. Then meis, if now he passes away, v'nafal if yavam cheresh, and now she falls for yibum to a brother which is also deaf mute, echeles, she can eat truma. That's what the Braisa is saying. So in other words, according to what Shmuel is adding here, she was able to eat truma when she was married to her husband. There was a full nisuin. before he became a cheresh. And therefore now that she falls to her yavam, that's a cheresh, this is a bia grua, it's not a regular bia because he's a cheresh, she'll be able to eat truma. And so that fits with what Shmuel said. We said before, Shmuel agrees that if she already was able to eat truma before, minan esuin, so then now when she falls to yavam cheresh, she'll be able to eat truma. Now the Gemara clarifies, according to this version, if you're changing the brayse like this, umay bizu. The brayse said, bizu yafa koyach hayavam bekoyach habal. How is she any stronger than the Baal? We were saying over here that by the Baal, she was also able to eat truma. So how is she any stronger than the Baal? So he explains, the ilu Baal, when it comes to a husband, cheresh me'ikare, if he would have become a cheresh before he fully married her, lo yecheles, she wouldn't be able to eat truma. But vilu yavam, when it comes to a yavam, cheresh me'ikare, even if she falls for yivam to him and he was originally right away from the beginning a cheresh, achla, she will be able to eat truma. So the Braisa is not saying that in this case she's stronger than the husband, because the husband was already able to eat truma. She was able to eat truma with him, but it's saying b'chlal that you see over here that she has a stronger koyach with him, with the yavam, than by a husband. By a husband, if he was cheresh before the nisuin, she cannot eat truma. Over here, even if he's a cheresh, if the yavam is a cheresh before the yivam, she could eat truma. So this is not a question on Shmuel. Okay, this is all one version of the machlekes of Rav and Shmuel, that they're only arguing regarding the case of Edison, but not Minan Nesuin, because if she was already married before to the brother, to her husband, the Kayin, she already was able to eat truma from before, so then now she would be able to eat truma again, even with these inferior beers. Now the Gemara brings an opposite version. Others said as follows. Min or Edison, if she was before married to her husband, which is a Kayin, and it was only Edison, so everybody will agree that now, if the bia to her yavam was one of these inferior bias, it's not strong enough that she should be able to eat truma. When she was married to her first husband, Akayin, she could not eat truma. So now, with one of these inferior bias, it doesn't have the koyach that she should be able to eat truma. Ki pligi. When is the machlekes minan nesuin? If she was already fully married to Akayin, to her first husband. So Rav says that now even with one of these inferior bias, she could still eat truma, the hahavis achle meikara, because since she was already eating truma with the first husband, so now the yavam continues that koyach that she had from before. But Shmuel says even in this case where she ate truma from before, she still cannot eat truma now, because ki Rabbi Rachmana bias shegi kemezid, when the Torah says that these inferior bias take effect, that's only l'dvarim ha'amurim beparsha. Only for those things that explicitly say in the parsha, which is regarding the fact that the yavam inherits his brother, and l'paitram and a yivim, as the Gemara said before, but not regarding achilas truma. So according to this version, Shmuel holds that with these inferior bias, she could never eat truma when she's marrying a kayin, the yavam, a kayin, including when she was already able to eat truma before from her first husband. For anything else, which over here the main thing that it refers to is for truma, this bia does not take effect. Now the Gemara asks, based on this version of what Shmuel said, but v'ha'amar Rav Nachman amar Shmuel, we quoted before, Rav Nachman said in the name of Shmuel, that kol sha'abal machil, if it's a case where she was able to eat with the husband truma, so then yavam machil, with the yavam as well, even though it was an inferior bia, she's able to eat truma. But now we're saying that according to Shmuel, this inferior bia, she's never able to eat truma. Even if with the first husband, she was able to eat truma. So the Gemara says, you're right, we have to read what Shmuel said differently, to add a word over there. It's not talking about this case where the husband originally, she was able to eat with him. Rather, you read it, kol bia shahabal machil. If it's a kind of a bia, it's a full, proper marriage, and the first baal would be machil her truma, then machalba, so then yavam machalba. Then the yavam with that kind of a bia would also be machal her. But v'chol bia she'ena bal machalba. But if it's a type of bia that with the first husband she would not be able to eat truma, so then ena yaval machalba. So then with the yavam she also doesn't eat truma. So this goes back to the point that we just said before. Let's say by the first husband, if he was a cheresh, so it's not a proper bia, so he would not be machal her. So for the yavam as well, if it's not a proper bia, he would not be machal her. That's what Shmuel was saying according to this version. So again, the Gemara brings back the same braisa we had before, which over here is going to be a question even on Rav's opinion. Because again, according to this version here, it says that Rav is maide that when it comes to Mina Edison, everybody agrees that she will not be able to eat truma with this inferior bia. So now this brayse we quoted before will be a question even on Rav. So Meisvei, the brayse says, Bas Yisrael pikach shenisar selekayim pikeach. A Bas Yisrael that's healthy does the first stage of marriage to a kain which is healthy, but then v'lo hispik lekainsa, he didn't get a chance to fully marry her. Ad shenis chadesh, he became a cheresh, so now he can't do the nisuin anymore. Eino yecheles, she does not eat any truma. Meis, if he passes away, v'nafel lefnei yavam cheresh, and now she comes also in front of a yavam which is also a cheresh. Oicheles, the bia with this yavam, which is an inferior bia because he's a cheresh, she could eat truma. And here the kayach of the yavam is stronger than the kayach of the baal. So what do we see over here? That even mina edison, she was only an edison to her husband originally, but still when she falls to the yavam with this inferior bia, she's able to eat truma. And now we said, according to this version, that even Rav says that in such a case you can't eat truma. So the Gemara says, now Bishlai Mila Rav. So we could answer this according to Rav, because Metaretz Kedataretz Meikar. We'll give the same answer like we said before. You add into the Braise that really it was not Mina Edison. What happened was that there was a proper Nisuin before he became a Cheresh, and only then is the Braise saying that the Yavam could eat Truma. So we already answered that before. But Elo Shmuel, but in this version here, according to Shmuel, Kashya, this will be a question, because what does Shmuel say? Shmuel says it doesn't matter whether she was married to her first husband, Mina Edison, Mina Nisuin. Now when you come to the Yavam and you do an inferior bia, you could never eat Trumah with an inferior bia. It doesn't matter, so it's not going to help to add anything into this Braise. This Braise that's saying that she can eat Trumah with an inferior bia from this Yavam, according to Shmuel, that's a question. So this is a Gemara Kashya. Yeah, that taka remains a question according to this second version here. Tana Rabbanon. So the Gemara now focuses on this taka, this halacha of this Braise, and it brings another Braise that discusses more details, and it brings another opinion about this. So the Braise says, Bas Yisrael pekachas shenisar selekayim pikeach. A Bas Yisrael that's healthy. So the first stage of marriage to a kayin, which is a pikeach, also healthy. Then v'lo hispik lekainsa, didn't get a chance to fully marry her at shenis charish until he became a cheresh. So einay cheles, like it said in the previous Braise, she cannot eat truma. Neilad la ben. However, if in this marriage she did have a child, so now cheles, she could eat truma. So Rashi here brings that besides the fact that a woman that marries a kayin, because her husband is a kayin, she could eat truma, there's another halacha. That even if b'schus her husband she can't eat truma, but b'schus the fact that she gave birth to her son, which is a kayin from this marriage, she can eat truma. Rashi brings the pasuk. It's going to be later in the Masechta. Hem yoichlu belachma. It teaches us that the mother of a son that's a kayin can eat truma. Namei saben. If this child she gave birth to passed away, so Rav Nassan Rav Nassan says she could still eat truma. She's still married to her husband, which is a kayin. She can eat truma. The Chachamim say that she cannot eat truma. So the Gemara explains here. My time at Rav Nassan. What's the reason of Rav Nassan's opinion that even after her son passed away, she could only eat truma b'schus her son, not b'schus her husband l'chayre, because the husband is a cheresh. So why is Rav Nassan saying that after the son passes away, she could still eat truma? So Rabbi says, Hoyel shekvar achla. Once she had this son, and she was already able to eat trumah b'schus her son, so that continues even after he passes away. Abaye says, asks on Rabbi on this reason here. How could he say this? Elamayata, if so, say the same thing. Bas Yisrael shenisas l'kayin. Any Bas Yisrael that ever gets married to a kayin, umisle, and her husband the kayin passes away, even if she had no children with him. So Teichel, maybe there you should still say that even after her husband the kayin passes away, she should still be allowed to continue eating trumah. Why? Shekvar achla, because she already ate trumah before. And we know that that's not the halacha. A Bas Yisrael that's married to a kayin could only eat trumah from him when he's still alive, or if he passed away, if she had children with him. But if she did not have children with him and he passed away, she can't eat trumah. So you can't use this concept of kvar achla. She already ate before. We don't apply such a thing.
And the woman who had a child, the child passed away, and then the husband dies, she's not eating truma.
True, and a chanami, but in such a case she can't eat truma. The only schus that a woman has.
I'm just saying the fact that we're saying over here that this is a mess. So, what's the difference? We're not. It's not the same case, because you can say the same. You can ask the same question by Yevamos.
I'm not 100% sure what you're saying. Okay, let me clarify the pshat in the Gemara. We'll have to go further. But the point the Gemara is saying is that the fact that she once had a schus to eat truma, whether because she was married to a husband, a kayin, or she once had a schus to eat truma because she was married to a son, or because she had a son, a kayin, that is. But now if the husband passes away, and that schus is not here anymore, because she's not married to him anymore, or her son passes away, so the source of the schus of the son is also not in anymore, it should leave. Her kayach, the truma, should leave, so there's no nafkamina.
I don't want to go further. So for the same reason, the son passes away, that make her Yevamos.
Okay, let's go weiter. Elam, says the Gemara, Kivin de Misley. What are we going to have to say? Once the husband passed away, so now that kedusha that she had, that she could eat truma because her husband is a kayin, that leaves. So hacha nami over here as well, when she had a son a kayin, even the misle, once that son passes away, paka kedusha semine, that kedusha that she has is gone. So the question still remains: what's the reason for Rab Nosson that even after her son passes away, that she could eat truma? So Elam Rav Yosef says a different pshat, that really Rab Nosson argues with the whole concept that we said before in the Gemara here. Kesava Rab Nosson's opinion is Nisue Cheresh, that even if she's getting married to her husband a kayin, and this kayin is a cheresh, machilim betruma, she could still eat truma. So until here in the Gemara we assume that when it comes to an isuin of a cheresh or a kayin a cheresh, you can't eat truma. But now the Gemara says that Rab Nosson holds it's nothing to do with the fact that she had this son of kayin. It's the nisuin itself of a cheresh, which is the reason why she could eat truma. And the Gemara explains what this is. And the reason is because v'loy gazrinon, we are not going to make a gzeire nisui cheresh atu kiddusha cheresh. That you shouldn't come to confuse the nisuin of a cheresh to the kiddushin of a cheresh. So Rashi here explains the point is the emes is that once a Bas Yisrael has even only a kedushin or an edison, the first stage of marriage with a kayin, that's enough of a reason that she should be able to eat truma. The point that we said before in the Gemara, that at the stage of edison you still can't eat truma, that's only a gzeira midrabanan. Rashi here brings one of the reasons because by the stage of edison she's still living with her father, she might bring the truma to her father's house, and her brothers might eat that from that truma. So it's only a gzeira midrabanan, but really minatayre, even from edison you're allowed to eat. So therefore Rab Nosson holds by a cheresh, once there was an isuin, she went and got fully married to a kayin, she's not anymore living with her father, she's not living anymore with her brothers, so there's no gzeira that she's going to bring that truma to her brothers. So therefore Rab Nosson says there's no reason why a Bas Yisrael that marries a kayin a cheresh shouldn't be able to eat truma. The only reason would be that maybe we should be geyser the nisuin of a cheresh up to the kiddushin of a cheresh, because the kiddushin of a cheresh never took effect b'chlal. A cheresh can't make kiddushin. So that was the pshat in the Gemara before. When the Gemara before said that by the nisuin of a cheresh you can't eat truma, it's only because of a gzeira, not to confuse it with the kiddushin of a cheresh that never took effect. But Rab Nosson, the Gemara is saying now, is not geyser. He says we're not geyser the nisui cheresh up to kiddushi cheresh, and therefore by the nisuin of a cheresh you could eat truma. That's the pshat of what Rab Nosson is saying here. So now Amalei Abaye asks Rav Yosef in this pshat, if so, noilad lo ben lamali. What does it say in the Braisa? The case over here is that when she gave birth to a son, then she could eat truma with this marriage to this kayin acheresh. Why does it have to say that? You're saying now nothing to do with the son. Even the nisuin itself to this kayin acheresh is the reason she can eat truma. Says the Gemara, Mishum Rabbanan. The Braisa is only mentioning that because of the opinion of the Rabbanan, that the Rabbanan are saying that only when the son is born, then she could eat truma. Fragt the Gemara, but v'lifleg Rab Nosson alayu bereisha. So why isn't Rab Nosson arguing on the first part of the Braisa? As soon as the Braisa says in the beginning that the marriage to a kayin of a cheresh, she cannot eat truma, right on that Rab Nosson should have argued. Why is he only arguing after the Braisa brings up the birth of a son? Says the Gemara, Shavik luhu l'Rabbanan ad Mesayim Mulsayu. So the Braisa first allows the Rabbanan to finish their point, to talk about marrying a kayin acheresh, and then the case of giving birth to a son with this marriage, and then v'hada palagalayu, and then he comes to argue. And he's arguing really even on the Reisha, on the whole halacha of being married to a kayin acheresh, Rab Nosson holds yikuri truma. But the Gemara says this still doesn't fit with the seder of the lashon of the Braisa, because ihachi, if so, lisni the Braisa should say, if the point there is that the Braisa first wants to finish the words of the Chachamim in the Reisha, so then that should be the order. The Braisa should say, Meis haben, gave birth to a son, you can eat truma. And then if the son dies, so it should first say the opinion of the Chachamim. Einay Cheles, that you don't eat Truma. That's what the Gemara is saying now. The Braisa first wants to finish the words of the Chachamim. And only afterwards, Rab Nosson Einay Cheles, that Rab Nosson says you could eat Truma. But if you look into the Braisa, it first brings up Rab Nosson's opinion, and only afterwards the Chachamim's opinion. So it's out of order. Kashya. So according to the Pshat of Rav Yosef, this remains a question in the Pshat of the Braisa. Going back to what it said in the Mishnah, so after the Mishnah brings the halacha regarding these kinds of bias that are not regular bias, and that takes effect by the Yavam and the Yevamos. So after that it says, V'chein haba al achas mikol arayis shebeteira. The same also applies to other arayis shebeteira. And then the Mishnah that is continues, oy psulais, or any psulais to a kain that marry a kain, like an almana to a kain gadol, a grusha v'chalutz to kain hedyet. So the same halacha applies here as well. So Rav Amram said about this part of the Mishnah as follows. Ha milse, the following halacha, Amalon Rav Sheshis. Rav Sheshis told us, and Va'anirinu le'einen, he illuminated our eyes, mimas nissen, that we see a source for this halacha from what it says here in the Mishnah. What's this halacha that he said? That Eishes Yisrael shenensa, a wife of Yisrael that had a relation with someone else, but it was against her will. Even though she's still permitted to be married to her husband, as we'll see soon, the Gemara will bring the drasha that if it was against her will, so she's allowed to go back to her husband. But psula l'kohuna, but she is already called a zaina because she had a relation with someone else out of marriage, even though it was against her will, and she's pasul to a kain. That's the halacha that Rav Shesha said. And then the Gemara says, in Vitane tuna. Seems like that from the lashon that it says here in our Mishnah, this is a raya, this is what he's saying, this exact halacha here. Because what does the Mishnah say? V'chein haba al achas mikol ha'arayis ha'amuris b'teira, that if someone has, a woman has a relation with one of these arayis that it says in the Torah, oy psulais, or one of the psulais, and what does it say in the Mishnah? That then this woman will become pasul to a kain. That's what the Mishnah concludes, that she becomes pasla, that she becomes pasul to the kain. So now, my v'chein, when the Mishnah here says this lashon of v'chein, so too, that you apply what it said before in the Mishnah to what it says now. So lav, don't you think that this refers to loishna b'sheigig, loishna b'mezid? It goes back to what it says before, that even when you have a bia that was b'sheigig or b'mezid, or loishna b'aynes, loishna b'ratzen, a bia that was whether b'aynes or b'ratzen. And on this, the Mishnah is saying that any type of these bias to any erva in the Torah will now passel this woman, it passels her to a kain. So Rashi says, the Gemara understands at this point that includes also the erva of an Eishes Ish. Eishes Ish is also one of the arayis in the Torah, and the Mishnah is saying that by an Eishes Ish, even if she had a bia with someone else and it was ba'aynes, it passels her, v'ketani pasla, this passels her to the kain. So from here we see this concept that an Eishes Ish that had a bia with someone else ba'aynes, she becomes pasul to the kain. So the Gemara says, loy, there's no raya from our Mishnah. Because my v'chein, when it says in our Mishnah v'chein, that so too I apply what it said before to what we're speaking about now regarding the arayis and regarding passing her to the kain, ahara. It's going on the halacha that we said before regarding hara, the beginning of the bia, that is considered to be by a yavam and a yevama, that's the fulfillment of the mitzvah. So now we're saying over here as well, benegeh to the arayis, that hara is already the isser of the erva. So the Gemara asks, hara deman. So when you're saying over here that we're applying it now also regarding hara, regarding what case are we speaking about? Ilay medarayis. Is it coming to say that just like we said before regarding a yavam and yavame, so too regarding the arayis, that hara is aser? So lememre, does that mean the arayis yalfinon mi yavame? That the fact that hara by arayis is the isser, we learn that out from yavame. That's what v'chein sounds like. That the original source is Yevama, and then we apply it also to the arayis as well. But that's not true. That's not true. Because Adarabah, we learned based on what we learned earlier in the sugya, it's the contrary. Yevama yalfina ma'arayis. The Gemara brought before the source for the fact that hara is aser is learned out from the psukim that it says by arayis, and then we have a gzeira shava of bia that we learn out Yevama from arayis. The other way, not the other way around. That the source is from Yevama. The Iker Hara ba'arayis ksiv. The whole halacha of hara that it's us says primarily benegeh to the arayis. Elo, so the Gemara says, "My v'chein," I can say, know what v'chein refers to? Ashaloi kedarka, not regarding hara. That you're right. That the main source is benigay to arayis, by arayis that is. But it's going on the shaloi kedarka. This that it said in the Mishnah that the relation of a yavam and yavama, whether it was the normal way, whether shaloi kedarka, not the normal way. The shaloi kedarka, the arayis. Now it's coming to say that the same thing by the isar of arayis, that the isar also applies the shaloi kedarka. So again, the Gemara asks the same question. Adarabbe, on the contrary, Iker mishkevei isha ba'arayis ksiv. This pasuk that's marbe shaloi kedarka, which you learn out from the term mishkevei isha, uses a plural term that means either way that you had a relation with her. That also says primarily by arayis. So why does the Mishnah say v'chein? That indicates that the source is from what it says by Yevamos. Elamai v'chein, says the Gemara, the source of the v'chein over here is that it comes from Yevamos, ashaloi kedarka, the chayve lavin. It's going on the case of shaloi kedarka regarding chayve lavin, which would be, let's say, an almana l'kain gadol or a grusha v'chalutza l'kain hedyet. Over there, it does not say mishkevei isha. So that's what the Mishnah is saying. V'chein, that you learn out from what it said before, that just like by Yevamos, you learned out from all the arayas that even shaloi kedarka takes effect. V'chein, so too beneged to these arayas of the chayve lavin that it's mentioned here in the Mishnah. That's the pshat of the v'chein. The point is, but you don't have a raya to the halacha that we said before regarding a eishes ish, that if she had a relation with someone else ba'aynis, that she would be asatar kayin. Similar halacha the Gemara brings now. Omar Rabbe said, eishes kayin shenansa baila, a wife of a kayin, again, shenansa, that is, that she went and had a relation with someone else, it was against her will, baila loika aleh mishum zayna. If she goes back to her husband, she can't have a relation again with her husband. And if she does, her husband will get malchus because she becomes a zayna. A zayna means that she had a relation with someone else, not married. So she can't go back to her husband. So the Gemara now says, Mishum Zayna in. Does that mean that he would only get Malchus because he was over on this special lav that a kain is not allowed to have a relation with a Zayna? Mishum Tumah Loi. But is he not over another lav of Tumah? So Rashi brings that there's another pasuk, we had it in the beginning of the Masechta, La Yuchal Baila Rishon Lekachta Asher Hu Tama. The Gemara darshaned over there that every time a woman has a relation with someone else, then she goes back to her husband, she's tummy. And the husband gets malchus for this. And over here, by a kayin, that should apply even if it was ba'aynis. So the Gemara is asking, there should be two malchus. One malchus for her being a zayna, and another malchus of the tumah that she had a relation with someone else. So the Gemara says, you're right. Eima af mishum zayna. That this woman, she goes back to her husband, a kayin, would get malchus twice, once because of a zayna, and once because of the tumah that's on her when she had a relation with someone else. So the Gemara asks on this, how could you get malchus for this? And here, the Gemara will bring the pasuk where we see the source, why by a kayin, even ba'aynis, she's considered to be a zayna already. So must have Rab Zaida, what's the source? Because the pasuk says, V'hi loinis pasa asura. If a woman that's married, she had a relation with someone else, and it was not by force, then she's asa to her husband. Ha nispasa, but if it was by force, she was caught, then materes, then she's allowed. Now the pasuk uses the term vihi. Vihi is an exclusion. So we learn from this, v'yesh l'cha acheres, there is another scenario, sha'ava bishan ispasa, even if it was against her will, asura, she will be asa to her husband. Ve'ezu, and what is this? Zu eishes kayin. This is the wife of a kayin, that over here, by a kayin, even if it was against her will, she's going to be asa to her husband. So now the Gemara explains, v'lav haba meklal asay. If this is the source, that even if it was against her will, she's asa to her husband, a kayin, so there's no lav over here. It's being learned from this pasuk, which is really an asay. So a lav that comes from an asay has a halacha of an esa. So how could you say that she would get malchus for this? So Rabbe explains, no, really it is a lav, because hakoil hayu bechlal zayna. In the beginning, when the Torah writes the lav, that a woman that had a relation with someone else, that she becomes tamei, and she becomes a zayna, and she's not allowed to go back to her husband, when the Torah writes that lav, really in the beginning, everything was included in this case of zayna. When it says everything, it means whether it was beratzin, whether it was ba'aynis, it was all included in zayna. So therefore that was the original lav. Now, Keshaparat Lacha Kostav Gabe Eishes Yisrael, then when the Torah specifies regarding a wife of a Yisrael, Vihiloi Nispasa Asura Ha Nispasa Muteres, that only by a Yisrael, if it was not against her will, is she asat her husband, but if it was against her will, she's mutat her husband. And the klal from here I learn out the Eishes Kayin, that when it comes to the wife of a Kayin, I exclude and say that a Kayin is not included in this halacha, Kedekaima Kaima. Goes back to the original lav, and the original lav is that even an Einis is also included in the lav. So therefore it's not only an Essa, it really is a lav because it's included in the original lav that she's a Zaina and she's Tameh and she's arsed to her husband. This is one version of what Rabbi said. The Gemara here brings another version, similar, but it's a little different. Vekada Amar Rabbi said, Eishes Kayin Shenansa, a wife of a Kayin that had a relation with someone else against her will, Baila Loika Le Mishum Tumah. So her husband, the Kayin, will get malchus for this relation with her because of the tumah that there is on a woman that had a relation with someone else, not Zaina. So the Gemara asks, Mishum tumah only because of the tumah, but Mishum Zaina loy, the unique lav by a Kayin that she's a Zaina does not apply over here. Says the Gemara, Alma, what I see over here from this is, Ba'ainis loy karina be Zaina. Even if the issur of marrying a woman by a Kayin, or being with your wife, that is, being with your wife that already had a relation with someone else, but Einis, that applies by a Kayin, so the Tumah, the Isser of Tumah applies, but the Isser of Zaina does not apply, according to this version. So again, the Gemara asks the same question and gives the same answer. Masav Rab Zeide, but it says in the Braisa, V'hila nispasa asura, nha nispasa muteres, and from this we learn out, V'yesh l'cha acheres, there's another case, Shafa pishin nispasa, even if it's an oines, asura shall be aser, and ve'izazu eishes kayin. This refers to the wife of a kayin. So the question is, V'lava bam beklal asay, if so, it's only an esse, so why would she get malchus for the fact that she became tamei? If I see over here that it's only a essa in a case that it's an oines, Omar Rabbe, so Rabbe answers, no, that really hakoil hoya b'chlal. You have the original lav that you're not allowed to be with a woman that became tummy to someone else, and everything was included, even a case of an oines. Achrei asher hu tama. So the lav that we're talking about now is not the lav of Zaina, according to this version, but the lav of Tumah. Everything was included, even a Einis. So from this I learn out, Miklal, the Eishes Kayin, Kidekaima Kaima. So I learn out that a Kayin is not included in this halacha, that only if it was beratzen, then she's asa to her husband. But a kayin, I say that even if it was ba'ainis, is also going to be asa. So therefore, it remains in its original status, and therefore included in the lav by a kayin is even if it was ba'ainis. So therefore, it is a lav, and that's why he said you get malchus for this.